Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 29th of August 2014, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson.
You see, we've got the wrong slide up. Sorry, Nick. Just thanks. We've got a brilliant helper in the studio who is actually flying solo for his first solo today, so if there are any problems, don't worry about it, because Nick's doing very, very well so far. Sorry, our little elf, as he seems to want to be called in the.
Our little elf. This is all good news. It's all progress. We are hoping for some very exciting updates and improvements in everything we're doing, but just bear with us while there's a little bit of a training exercise that goes on. Well, one thing we don't have full control over is the weather, and we've got a report that Norfolk is slightly cloudy with a bit of sun at the moment, but unfortunately for the people living in South Wales at least, it's pretty cloudy with rain there.
Yes.
What can you say? I won't mention England at all. Well, I have Norfolk. I've put on my special Friday tie today. For those of you that have got high definition video, you will be able to see the small rats infesting my tie. And really, I've put this on because the state of the country at the moment is appalling. We're beginning to see the truth of the despicable lies, fraud, corruption and sheer criminality that are going on in Britain. Meanwhile, we have David Cameron standing on the world stage to lecture other countries, in particular Russia, as to how they should behave. But over to you, and a brave Dutchman, I think we're starting with.
A brave Dutchman, yes. This is Kees Hamelink, who is Emeritus Professor of International Communication at the University of Amsterdam, and he also holds other posts at other universities. And he decided that he would write a letter to Vladimir Putin. So he says, "Dear Mr. Putin, please accept our apologies on behalf of a great many people here in the Netherlands for our government and our media. The facts concerning MH17 are twisted to defame you and your country. We are powerless onlookers as we witness how the Western nations, led by the United States, accuse Russia of crimes they commit themselves more than anybody else. We reject the double standards that are used for Russia in the West. In our societies, sufficient evidence is required for a conviction. The way you and your nation are convicted for crimes without evidence is ruthless and despicable. You have saved us from a conflict in Syria that could have escalated into a world war. The mass killing of innocent Syrian civilians through the gassing by al-Qaeda terrorists, trained and armed by the US and paid for by Saudi Arabia, was blamed on Assad. In doing so, the West hoped public opinion would turn against Assad, paving the way for an attack on Syria. Not long after this, Western forces have built up, trained and armed an opposition in the Ukraine to prepare a coup against the legitimate government in Kiev. The putschists taking over were quickly recognized by Western governments. They were provided with loans from our tax money to prop up their new government up. The people of Crimea did not agree with this and showed this with peaceful demonstrations. Anonymous snipers and violence by Ukrainian troops turned these demonstrations into demands for independence from Kiev. Whether you support these separatist movements is immaterial, considering the blatant imperialism of the West. Russia is wrongly accused without evidence or investigation of delivering the weapon systems that allegedly brought down MH17. For this reason, Western governments claim they have a right to economically pressure Russia. We, awake citizens of the West who see the lies and machinations of our governments, wish to offer you our apologies for what is done in our name. It's unfortunately true that our media have lost all independence and are just mouthpieces for the powers that be. Because of this, Western people tend to have a warped view of reality, and we are unable to hold our politicians to account. Our hopes are focused on your wisdom. We want peace. We see that the Western governments do not serve the people but are working towards a new world order. The destruction of sovereign nations and the killing of millions of innocent people is seemingly the price worth paying for them to achieve that goal. We, the people of the Netherlands, want peace and justice also for and with Russia. We hope to make clear to the Dutch government, that the Dutch government speaks for itself only. We pray our efforts will help to diffuse the rising tensions between our nations."
Well, what an amazing statement. The man's encapsulated really everything that needs to be said. And we'd encourage everybody to go and have a look at what he said, read it very carefully. And of course, a large number of intellectuals and academics, at least in Holland, have come out in support of this statement. So it appears that the truth is slowly but surely bubbling up to the surface now. And the idea that, well, have we got people sitting in Russia at the moment causing all the trouble? Certainly not. We need to look much closer at home. So we're going to say well done, Professor Hamlink, and well done, Holland.
Yeah. So the Cabbage Patch Twit then, he has come out to talk about the so-called invasion of the Ukraine by Russia. And he is alleging that they are effectively invading Ukraine, although neither he nor Obama want to use the word invade just yet. So he had this to say: "I'm extremely concerned by mounting evidence that Russian troops have made large-scale incursions into the southeastern Ukraine, completely disregarding the sovereignty of a neighbour. The international community has already warned Russia that such provocative actions would be completely unacceptable and illegal. President Putin has said that Russia is willing to find a peaceful solution to the conflict, but this is not credible when Russia is supporting pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine with arms and troops. It's simply not enough to engage in talks in Minsk while Russian tanks continue to roll over the border into Ukraine. Such activity must cease immediately. We urge Russia to pursue a different path and to find a political solution to the crisis. If Russia does not, then she should be in no doubt that there will be further consequences." I'm speechless once again. No, just contrast the previous comments with what this idiot has to say. And
well, of course, he's not saying it. When I listen to that text, there is no way that David Cameron, with his what is clearly a very low intellect, I'm going to say, in my opinion, could have put that text together. He's not capable of analysing or speaking at that level. So, of course, this has been put together by who? Rory Stewart, Lawrence of Arabia, chairman of the Defence Select Committee. He's probably the man who's helped with this text. So Cameron here spewing out words of unknown people who've been meeting behind closed doors.
Well, of course, it was a written statement, so you never know who actually wrote it or who delivered it.
No, and timing just in advance of course, the NATO summit in South Wales. And I should perhaps say that quite a few people pointing out with delight that they hope the rain continues in South Wales for the 150 heads of state attending that NATO conference.
Yes, but only inside the fence, right?
Well, probably the chemtrailing boys can do that. Yeah, rain inside the security fence.
But at livemap.com, we have a map here showing this Russian invasion, and they show it live. But the point here is that the mounting evidence, which Cameron talks about, is all coming from social media. So if you go and look at livemap.com and look at this map, on the right-hand side of the page are all the reports from Twitter and Facebook and so on of these alleged incursions. So you've got to ask, where are the UK and US satellite images? Where's the intelligence data? Or is it the case that, in fact, the Yellowcake affair over Iraq has resulted in MI6 being too scared to comment publicly anymore? Perhaps they, in other words, there is no intelligence or satellite evidence, and so they're keeping absolutely quiet.
Well, we've got to add to that, Mike, that of course BBC boasting of its ability through BBC Media Action to penetrate into countries in order to recruit and train local, independent BBC reporters. So we know a lot of the information coming from these areas, supposedly coming from independent local people, is in fact actually coming from trained reporters who've been trained by the BBC, famed not for independence, but increasingly for propaganda.
So they're posting onto Twitter, masquerading as local people.
Yeah. And of course BBC monitoring has been working with over many years with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and via that through into GCHQ. So if we're talking the BBC, we're actually talking British government reports rather than independent reporting.
But it's all right, because as we know, the NATO summit takes place next week, and we're going to have 92 reservists taking part in that summit, so that's all right then. But on Tuesday, actually the day before the summit, there's the UK delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly is going to host a conference entitled Approaching the Summit 2014. And this, they say, is an opportunity for parliamentarians from across the alliance to meet key decision makers and discuss the themes of the NATO summit, which will be held in Wales on the 4th and 5th of September. And they say that Foreign Secretary Right Honourable Philip Hammond MP will address these themes in a speech to the conference, which is being held at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in London. I would suggest that this is a great opportunity for some flying columns. Let's get some video footage from that event if we can. So that's on Tuesday, the 2nd of Tuesday, the 2nd of September at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And I think since many parliamentarians will be there, then perhaps it might be a good opportunity to actually communicate with your parliamentarian and let them know what you think about this NATO conference and what you think about what's going on in the world at the moment with this push for war.
Wouldn't that be fantastic to see a similar public response to that outpouring of indignation over an attack on Syria, which of course affected many MPs? They got scared, they started to back down, and ultimately they voted against the government. Perhaps it's time for people to be doing the same thing, to express their disgust at what actually is taking place via the NATO summit within Gulag, Cardiff.
So let's not forget, it's not just the Russian front which is being developed here. The US continues to behave like one of those really annoying little mosquitoes, sort of just buzzing around your head and nipping you from once in a while. So RT reporting here that Beijing is calling on Washington to scale back or cancel aerial surveillance of the Chinese mainland. And they're saying that this practice represents a security risk to China, and they're really pretty upset about it. Their defense spokesman, Yang Eugene, sorry, I do apologize if I've pronounced that incorrectly, said that according to different situations, we will adopt different measures to make sure we safeguard our air and sea security of the country. So, once again, right round the sort of Russia-China border, we've got this type of sort of pathetic, let's just poke a stick in to see what reaction we can get.
Well, there's interesting things going on, Mike. Of course, the Americans have already have operated carrier battle groups off the Chinese coast for an extremely long time. But what is really not being reported in mainstream media is the sheer power now of the Chinese armed forces. And it's clear that in many areas they're absolutely capable of taking on American forces. But here we are again talking about the Americans, David Cameron on the world stage, saying what Russia or China or other countries should and should not do. What does he base his statement on? It has to be American military power, because, of course, he's decimated Britain's military via the backdoor agreements, which were conducted before he was actually elected. Yeah. For those of you who haven't seen the UK column reports on Cameron's betrayal of the military in UK, do have a look at the website and have a look for our article about secret meetings in France, assisted by the so-called charity, the Franco-British Council.
But let's not forget, of course, that it's not just a military war that's going on at the moment. It's also a financial economic war. This comment from the Russians here saying BRICS has no ideology, no hidden agenda. This is the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Ryabkov. So I'm really having
a bad day today.
Ryabkov. I think it's quite true. The agenda is absolutely out in the open, and it's one that's in direct opposition to the World Bank and the IMF, as we've mentioned before. And as such, it is a direct attack on the Inter-Alpha Group financial system. And for those that don't know, the Inter-Alpha Group is a cartel of some of the world's biggest banks, originally established in the 70s by Rothschild. And of course, it is utterly bankrupt. So they are really desperate about what's going on around this BRICS conference and this BRICS initiative. Sergei Ryabkov said in an interview with International Affairs magazine, and it was also posted on the Russian Foreign Ministry website, that, quote, BRICS is an informal group of 5 states that are gradually expanding their work agenda, including the political, economic, and applied agenda and other applied agenda. And I think the key point here is it's I hate to use the word collaboration, but it's a group of independent nations that seem to be working together to achieve some things among themselves, and they're also inviting other nations to do the same or to get involved. And so they're not attempting to, as far as we can see at this point anyway, they're not attempting to create some great European Union-style federalist superstate. Some people would say, may argue that this is Russia attempting to reinstate some form of Soviet Union, but that certainly is not how it comes across, basically because of the way that they're going about this. In the meantime, they're really pushing for trade with other countries. Now, Russia, of course, experiencing sanctions from the European Union. These sanctions aren't actually really having much effect on Russia. They're having much greater effect on particularly German companies. But nonetheless, again, Russia continuing to attempt to make alliances with other countries. And I think yesterday or the day before, can't remember which, I do apologise for that, Putin was meeting with Jacob Zuma from South Africa, again on the BRICS issues, discussing the BRICS issues. And in the meantime, of course, we have mentioned what's going on with Argentina, and the financial system, the Western financial system continues its apoplexy there. And now they're effectively trying to bring China into the fight. So they've failed so far to actually recover any of the assets that they claim that they are owed by Argentina. Argentina is in default at the moment on the basis that they are refusing to pay back the vulture funds who bought up distressed Argentinian debt and are now trying to asset strip the country. And what they're effectively doing at this point is attempting to bring the Chinese government into court in the United States and require the Chinese to give them details of any assets that have been built using loans to Argentina from China, with the view to actually steal those assets, whether that be railways, roads, ships, power stations, communications, irrigation, any of these kind of things. They just want to steal this infrastructure and effectively leave Argentina to, if there's any outstanding debt with China, to somehow manage that with China. But it's an fairly incredible situation. Doesn't get any better, really.
So we've got antagonism, we've got the movement towards war, certainly in Eastern Europe at the moment, all being driven, of course, by British politicians, King Cameron at the forefront. But these are the men actually putting our daily lives at risk. And I think we just switched to what's happening in UK.
Well, just before we do that, just to clarify Paul's comment in the chat box, it's not the US taking China to court. It is actually the financial system in the form of some hedge funds. So whether you find that funnier than the US taking them to court or not, I don't know. But it is an incredible situation building there.
The hedge funds that are running the courts in the first place, probably.
Yeah.
Well, this is one that you found, Mike, from... politics.
Well, this was really only to introduce your subject because I just found it really ironic that politics.co.uk is suggesting that the Rotherham abuse case is showing the danger of having only men in charge, when, as far as I can see, the people that were actually mainly hands-on with this, quite a number of them were women.
Well, the hard fact to do with paedophilia is, of course, that roughly 50% of abusers are women. This is one of the issues that the mainstream press and media simply do not want to talk about. But you're absolutely right, Mike. Once you know that virtually half of paedophiles and child abusers are women, perhaps we should start to look a lot closer at the women who've been put very close to families and children through social services and the so-called child protection system. But let's get into the meat of our politicians. Well, we've got the saga going on at the moment that the Rotherham Police Commissioner doesn't want to go. He's clinging on to his job at the moment, Sean Wright. Of course, the Mail not missing a trick here by putting in a big photograph of him with his Labour rosette and next to Ed Miliband. But this problem is spread across all three parties, so don't be fooled into the petty politics that the Mail's playing with here. We've got a serious situation where just in Rotherham alone, we now know we're dealing with at least 1,400 abuse victims. Of course, if we move across to Nottingham, at one children's home alone, Beechwood, we're up to 100 victims, and the police are looking at another 6 or 7 children's homes. So multiply this across the country into North Wales, into the abuse in Scotland. We have massive child abuse, which has been perpetrated through the so-called care system. And the only way that that can happen is, of course, that we've got paedophiles operating in positions of power and in the very organisations which say they're there to protect children. If we can just bring that one back up on screen, if we can. Just wanted to highlight this bit because an important bullet point here is that the Mail is saying that Mr. Wright, elected by the public, cannot be sacked by police or politicians. So we've got to say, just how does the public get rid of Mr. Wright? And what the Mail goes on in the article to say is that police commissioners can only be removed from office at the polling booths or if they've committed a serious crime. Local crime boards are able to suspend PCCs if they're charged with an offence that carries a maximum sentence of more than 2 years. They can then be sacked if they are convicted. So now we've got a brilliant circular argument that we've got people failing in their duty, misfeasance in public office or malfeasance in public office, but you can only get rid of them if they could be investigated by the very police who are themselves complicit in covering up the crimes in the first place. We're now moving into a complete cartoon scenario. This isn't accidental. We are seeing the breakdown of our public institutions, not due to some accidental change in people's behaviour, but we are going to suggest by the fact that people have simply been reframed to think they can get away with crime, fraud, corruption, make a few mistakes, it doesn't matter.
This is exactly the same situation with parliamentary MPs, of course, because now that we've got fixed term parliaments, they also cannot be gotten rid of unless they commit a serious offence in exactly the same way. So we can't dissolve Parliament outside of the normal election process anymore.
This is true. What we really need to look for, of course, is millions of people to withdraw their consent from, can I say, these idiots that are causing such devastation in the country. We know via Syria and the fact that the British public could block that attack. The British public, if properly motivated, is capable of dealing with these people. And of course, we always say, and it's absolutely true, that we get many calls and many emails from both serving police constables, men and women, and retired policemen and women who are utterly disgusted that their senior officers are not only covering up child abuse, but in many cases there's indications that they've been involved in the rings in the first place. But here we've got another example. We've chosen another Mail headline here, but the Mail is really pushing this thing forward. Rotherham Council staff seized files and wiped computers to cover up the scale of child sex grooming. So the council officials ordered a raid on youth services ahead of a year 2000 report. They seized details of abuse victims, alleged attackers, etc. Children's Services Chief Joyce Thacker, this is a lady who's been in the press before, has still refused to resign. She insisted that a sense of proportionality was needed about the abuse. Here's the politically correct language. We're dealing about the rape and abuse of serious sexual abuse of children. She says we need to keep this in proportion. Well, we think we need to keep it in proportion. Sorry, we just missed that headline, Nick, if you can bring that back on. What this really is malfeasance in public office. We are now looking at criminal action by council officials. So we're going to ask what the press are doing. And we want to highlight this lady, if we can just bring her up. There we are. This is Ms. Thacker. And of course, this was the lady that removed children from a foster couple because they belonged to UKIP. and it would appear that Ms Thacker and her team regarded this as some sort of racist organisation. So we've now got a very, very dangerous situation in public authorities. We've got criminal activity destroying evidence of the abuse of children. And then if anybody is politically motivated to stand up against this sort of thing, as many UKIP supporters certainly are, then in comes Ms Thacker to say, well, we're going to remove your children. If we bring her up and have a look at her a bit closer, of course, this lady, common purpose leader, she insists she was right to take the foster children away. If you want to read more details about this, exclusive here by Breitbart is talking about the local UKIP candidate in Rotherham, of course, slamming the council over the failings and calling for the resignation of everyone involved. Personally, I think that's too soft. First, they need to resign, and secondly, a detailed police investigation should start immediately into the crime to cover up child abuse. So what other concerns have people got? Well, interestingly, we had this email expressing concerns at the common purpose links with child protection failure. Apologise for the small text, but I wanted to put the email up in full, and I will read it for you. Now, this is an email that's been sent to Panorama. Dear Panorama, I have become really concerned that the true effect of the common purpose relationships at work in the Rotherham area became a significant root cause for the continued and frightening effects which led to the prolonged denial of issues at Rotherham. Since the inception of common purpose training, the list of graduates from the Barnsley-Rotherham matrix has grown to include RCC, police, health, social services and voluntary sector workers, RCC being, of course, the local council. All are conditioned by performance assessments, both individual and departmental, often undertaken by Audit Commission and CQC staff also from the Common Purpose stable, and taught through neuro-linguistic programming that only positive approach and positive response will get results. Other officers or people who dare to question the approach, led by graduates who work beyond their departmental spheres of responsibility, will be steamrolled out of the way, like the poor researcher who Newsnight reported cried out in 2002, but who was chastised and censured for doing so. When correctiveness and when positive speak and departmental achievement plus management performance bonuses demand rave reviews, it's a perfect environment for political correctness and the power of neuro-linguistic programming to thrive. Welcome to Rotherham, and look at the Council Scrutiny Panel reports in 2007. Look at the disconnect between the reality we now know existed and the rose-tinted reporting that went on. Note the childcare commentary contained in Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel. And the work on bullying in schools may be wholly laudable, but kids' lives were being stolen and the circumstances brushed under the carpet. At various times, I assisted common purpose training days and went on reprogramming days on equality and diversity as and when requested. Even though this is a tough ask, as many BBC employees have been given the common purpose training and politically correct mindset, please will Panorama A, address the issues raised in this email, and B, ask the questions out loud. Common Purpose has been at the scene of many of the last 10 years' worth of local government road crashes, but no one has told the Emperor he's lost his clothes. This time someone stole his children. Now, obviously, if you pause that, rerun our news today and pause that, you can read it, but I'll try and make that email available. The person who sent it to us, extremely well informed about the activities of Common Purpose, having seen it for themselves within a public organisation, and as the individual states in the email, having been involved themselves in promoting common purpose training, that is until they were awake. So we've got a pretty dangerous mixture going on here We've got a political charity, Common Purpose, training people to believe that what? They're above the law, Mike?
Yep.
Well, can we ram this point home? We think we can. Let's bring up these two despicable gentlemen. James Rennie, particularly vicious paedophile, of course, a Common Purpose chosen leader, and Matthew Byrne, vicious sex offender, and he was on a Common Purpose advisory board up in the Liverpool area. He has been imprisoned for a horrific attack on prostitutes. James Rennie, part of a gang of paedophiles abusing month-old children. So these men had penetrated the secret Common Purpose networks and were prepared to use those networks, we can assume, to recruit further paedophiles and, of course, get close to children. Now, why is it that Britain's government doesn't understand what's going on? Well, remember that David Cameron is a promoter of Common Purpose. Just have a look at their website. And Prime Minister David Cameron, of course, has been promoting Common Purpose very publicly in India over the last couple of years. But what happens when these men simply don't know what they're doing? Well, here we've got an interesting photograph with, of course, Michael Heseltine. Here's King David himself, and he just happens to be rubbing shoulders with Matthew Byrne, the vicious sex offender and Common Purpose leader and former children's charity boss. What's going on here? Is it a question that David Cameron is totally unaware and ill-informed? Or is it the fact that he simply doesn't care who he mixes with?
It is staggering how many people just aren't aware of the people that they're mixing with and the things that they're involved in.
So we could say, well, at the moment, we just think that David Cameron he hasn't got the mental acumen himself to understand what's going on. But even though we've got royal protection teams in the police, we've got security services, we've got David Cameron's own police protection team, none of these police officers or special forces, special police forces, knew anything about the activities of these paedophiles.
Nobody in Rotherham knew anything. Nobody in Oxford knows anything about Oxford and Sherwood Valley College. Nobody in the BBC knew anything about Jimmy Savile. Nobody in the House of Commons knows anything about politicians who are paedophiles. Nobody knows anything. Nobody
knew anything about Savile. Nobody in the NHS. Of course they knew. So what is David Cameron's opinion on child abuse? Well, we'd like to thank the person who sent us in this letter. It's come in from the Direct Communications Unit. So this letter written on behalf of David Cameron. And this is David Cameron's reply to a very detailed letter talking about horrific child abuse and the situation of child abuse victim and whistleblower Melanie Shaw in Nottingham. So the reply was, Dear X, I'm writing on behalf of the Prime Minister to thank you for the copy of your letter of the 26th of July addressed to the Home Secretary. Mr. Cameron appreciates you taking the time and trouble to share your concerns. So here we've got 1,400 children abused in Rotherham. We've got a minimum of 100 so far as a result of the Nottingham Beechwood case. We've got Elm House, we've got North Wales, we've got the police sitting on files of evidence against paedophiles in Westminster, and he regards this as sharing your concerns.
This is kind of like Ken Clarke and the missing dossier. I passed it on. It wasn't my problem anymore.
Yeah. And these are the same men and women, of course, who at the moment are on the world stage warning Russia, what Russia should and should not be doing, warning Assad, talking about Syria, talking about Iraq, talking about Afghanistan, and of course, having destroyed Libya, they're now telling the Libyan people how to construct their own country in a David Cameron-style democracy. Unbelievable hypocrisy and, of course, unbelievably dangerous. But if we go a step deeper, the Mail flagging up here that it's very interesting that so-called child protection officers from...
Sorry, these are all the men from Rotherham, is that it?
Pardon?
These are all the men from Rotherham?
These appear to be women, Mike.
Yeah, that's what's just confused.
Yes, I'm with you all the way. So here we have three ladies Now, at the moment, all the paper is saying they're interested that whilst failings were going on in Rotherham, these ladies were in post. So we're not saying that any or each or any of them was at fault. But basically, this is the significant thing, that these people were in post while nobody knew about the abuse in Rotherham. And then what happens? Well, let's take this lady. She moves to the Nottingham area in the same job. She becomes a child protection coordinator. And of course, why are we interested in Nottingham? Well, in Nottingham, we've got Melanie Shaw, horrifically abused as a child at home, horrifically abused in the so-called care of Nottingham City and County Council. She goes to the police, reports her abuse, the abuse of other children. She talks about the deaths of children in this home. And what happens? Well, not a lot, but we're going to come on to that in more detail. So people, we could say, have possibly failed in their posts in one area, are simply moved across to start the process again in another one. Well, let's place our trust in Britain's police force. And of course, we should go to the top of the tree, which is ACPO, Setting Police Policy and Standards. We'd like to thank Nick for coming up with this ACPO press release on child exploitation. So do bear with me. I'd like to read this to you. It says all chief constables have committed to delivering a national plan for tackling child sexual exploitation. National Policing Lead for Child Abuse Investigation, Chief Constable Simon Bailey, said, "Protecting vulnerable people from abuse and exploitation is a priority for the police service. Awareness and understanding of child sexual exploitation has increased significantly in the last few years. Chief constables across the country are investing significantly more time and resource in investigating allegations of child sexual exploitation and are dealing with an unprecedented increase in reports. In 2013, ACPO developed a national plan for tackling child sexual exploitation. This plan incorporates best practice, lessons learned from previous reviews and input from experts in the field. In a relatively short space of time, police forces have moved from child sexual exploitation being barely recognised and understood to making real progress in ensuring that their response is effective. Many of the recommendations in the action plan have already been achieved, and the plan has been updated with further recommendations for improvement. All chief constables have committed to delivering this action plan." I'm just going to repeat that sentence. All chief constables have committed to delivering this action plan. The findings of the report into the failings in Rotherham are shocking. Nothing can excuse the events it describes. We have made real changes in policing to stop this kind of abuse happening and to protect young people. Let me assure victims that if they report abuse to the police, we will listen to them and we will take their allegations seriously. We will treat them sensitively. So this report says that all chief constables have committed to delivering this action plan, and they say we're going to take the allegations seriously and we will treat victims sensitively. So let's bring in this lady, if we can bring her back on screen. Here we are. Sarah Thornton, Chief Constable, Thames Valley Police, just happens to be Vice President of ACPO. Well, what did she do when this Asian man made over 80 reports of the abuse of white youngsters at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College? He made that report to Thames Valley Police. What did Sarah Thornton's police force do? Nothing. In fact, they conspired with the college to have this man sacked, whereupon he was hounded and bullied as a result of his bravery in coming forward. And although the police took interview statements from some victims, they then didn't record those interviews properly, and inside Thames Valley Police documentation is now showing they did absolutely nothing to investigate the abuse of white youngsters by white paedophiles in Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. And it was only the UK column that was able to print a front page showing that there had been a conspiracy of silence between Vice President of ACPO's police force, the college, and of course Oxfordshire City Council and the Safeguarding Board. But if that's not enough, let's turn to Chris Eyre, Chief Constable of Nottingham Police. Here is one of the Chief Constables who has submitted to the new ACPO plan. Well, what has this man done? Well, he's worked with the Crown Prosecution Service to put Melanie Shaw, a victim of horrific childhood abuse and abuse in Beechwood Home, Nottingham. This woman has now been in prison since the 25th of July with no substantive evidence against her on charges of arson and criminal damage being presented in court. Meanwhile, in prison, Sodexo Prison, Peterborough, this lady has been bullied by staff and perhaps most importantly denied her medication that she's needed on many years to help get over the suffering of the abuse. So sheer hypocrisy and lies by ACPO. And let's remember these statements. ACPO says if victims report abuse to the police, we will take their allegations seriously. We will treat them sensitively. Well, unless they actually do, in which case they're banged up in prison.
Bunch of liars.
These people are disgusting. Of course, we're not allowed to swear because this is a UK column news report. But these people, unbelievably disgusting. We've got criminal cover-ups of abusers within Britain's police force, aided and abetted, of course, by the Crown Prosecution Service and ultimately our government through Theresa May to David Cameron. So if you're listening to this report from overseas and you've been misguided enough to think that Britain stands on its reputation for a wonderfully fair and correct judicial system and trust our police, I'm afraid the reality is rather different. And as we've pointed out on many occasions, north of the border, we now have a junta under Alex Salmond, Sir Stephen House, head of Police Scotland, and Kenny McCaskill, Minister of Justice. And what happens in Scotland? Well, we took an example, 8 people charged with child abuse offences, they get bail. But of course, Robert Green, who campaigns for abuse victims, is still locked up in his home. I'll just pause there, Mike, because what we're dealing with is just disgraceful. And until we get the issue of child abuse sorted out and the criminals in Westminster, the judiciary and the police, we're not going to be able to tackle other issues such as a government that initiates unlawful wars overseas. There we are.
Yes. Okay, Scottish independence then, obviously a big issue. And we have Craig Murray here, former UK ambassador to Uzbekistan. And he gave a speech in Fife in support of the Scottish Yes campaign for independence. I just wanted to highlight some of the things he said. He said, I think it's impossible to be proud of the United Kingdom, and I think after today's news programme you can understand why Craig Murray has this view, but I think we've got to take into account that he has this view as a former British ambassador, someone with a very senior role within the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And he says, I think when we invaded Iraq, we did to the United Nations what Hitler and Mussolini did to the League of Nations. I've seen it on the inside, and it's almost always about the control of resources. It's not an academic construct. The system stinks. Westminster stinks. He went on to say, the British government is deeply, deeply immoral. They don't care how many people they kill abroad if it advances them. And he said, anyone who votes no with regard to the independence vote, anyone who votes no to support a pathological state which is a danger to the world, a rogue state prepared to go to war to make a few people wealthy. That is why I say it is not possible to be a decent person and vote no, and we shouldn't be ashamed to say that. Well, while I agree with his sentiments about Britain, I think that separating Scotland away from the United Kingdom is basically a fairly cowardly act in a sense, because really what we need to do is to deal with Westminster. And if you're just going to go off and live in Scotland and then hope that independence is going to help you, then really you're missing the point. Cameron and his cronies intend to blow up this world, and they tend to bankrupt it on the way. Having independence, if it really was independence in any case, but having independence isn't going to protect you from that. The only way to deal with this issue is actually to deal with what's going on in Westminster.
Yeah, and this man appears to be unaware of what life is really like in Scotland at the moment under Alex Salmond. So Scottish police being armed, each child to have a social worker, trust us. It's pretty incredible.
Yes.
And of course, Robert Greene has shown that there is no real justice in Scotland now. So goodness knows what it's going to be like when Alex Salmond is let loose on his own.
But I totally applaud his statements about the UK in general. We've got to deal with it, our country here.
Well, what are we going to do about it?
Well, one thing we're going to do is start getting people active again. And British Constitution Group hasn't had a conference in quite some time. We've decided to hold our conference this year in the Ramada in Birmingham Sutton Coldfield on the 1st of November 2014. Of course, the 1st of November is the day that Nice Treaty and Lisbon Treaty kicks in with regard to qualified majority voting. So there's the veto disappears at that point, and therefore a host of sovereignty that the UK, at least notionally, has at this point is gone to the European Union because we no longer have the right of veto. That happens on the 1st of November 2014, and so we thought that was a good day to have the conference. So that's a Saturday. But then on the Sunday, there's going to be a second day's events at the same location. And this is going to be Your Health, 7 Keys to Surviving the Post-Antibiotic World. So this is basically, I've got the press release here. Modern medicine is running out of ways to stop infection. Research shows we have a maximum of 7 years before antibiotics fail completely. Experts from around the world, leaders in cutting-edge scientific natural solutions, will show you how you can effectively treat infection. And so this is... you can find out more at drugthebug.com. This is Dr. Graham. Oops.
That's okay.
Sorry, just switch back there, Nick, for a second, please. So two events happening on the same weekend. Details will be on the British Constitution Group website next week. And if you sign up for the newsletter at drugthebug.com, you'll find out more.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just finally, Doomwatch tonight, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, ukcolumn.org/live. You will see that the guests are John Woodrick and Salon from Get Out of Debt Free. These guys have been doing some fantastic work with regard to the evictions. They've been working with Guy Taylor and a host of other people. So join us at 6 p.m. for 2 hours of having a discussion with them.
Brilliant. And just before we say goodbye for now, we made a follow-up call to the Met Police this morning to see what the status was of the famous James Foley video. The video not available in UK.